the other thing I want to ask you about before we wander completely off piste later on is the idea of failure itself, because we get all this stuff in the press.
Mm,
Oh, failure's good. You
mm.
must fail,
Oh,
and
it's great. Yeah.
I've taken part in many of these debates as well. But people then seem to think to get the idea that failure is almost guaranteed, but the more you do it, the quicker you get to the successful bit, rather than thinking we should just learn from failure when it happens.
Mm.
So are people still going ahead failing as quickly as they can, or has that are they going to keep doing that, or are we going to learn from failure? What's actually happening now, failure
Yeah.
wise?
I mean, uh, so failure, I didn't know this at the time when I started Museum of Failure, but I started it at the right time in like the sort of the zeitgeist of failure and how cool failure was. There's fuck up nights, there's FailCon, the CEOs of some of the biggest, most well-known company were on stage at the time, 2015, 16, talking about how important it is to fail. So failure was the beginning of failure as being cool. Um, but what has happened since then, and I mean, COVID and has definitely played a role in that, is that um, I don't know if we've reached peak failure or not, but there's definitely a backlash. Like, wait, not all failure is good. And if we fail but don't learn from it, then it's definitely a waste in so many regards. Um, but I think today, to answer your question about how are people still taking risks and fail, I would say no, not enough. I'm obviously biased, but there's still in most organizations, whether they're public or private, there's still an assumption that you can be innovative without taking risks, and that's just not the case. You need to take those risks where where you 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 try unproven methods, and push the boundaries in a way that can be uncomfortable and more or less risk prone, but most organizations need to increase their failure rate rather than decrease it.
Yeah. Is that something they have to consciously do, or should they just be looking at the whole sort of organizational attitude to risk and
I
say we
mean,
need to be a little more, because there's the risk reward thing, isn't there? That
yeah.
you can take a little bit of risk and you get a little bit of reward. You can take a lot of risk
Mhm.
and get a lot of reward, or a lot of cost. As whatever. So are we just becoming less risk averse? More risk averse.
More risk averse. Yeah, I would say yes to that, unfortunately, because um, it's almost like, yeah, we want the good part, the rewards of a successful innovation, but we don't want the costs, which are 90% of innovation projects fail. You don't want those, and especially, and I'm not going to blame COVID for everything, but there's definitely been a backlash there of like how willing companies are to take risks in innovation. And that's understandable. If you're trying to just survive, then you're not going to be trying to push the envelope forward. But there's also something like you said before about, I mean, learning, taking. So there's different takes and approaches to risk and failure when it comes to innovation. So one of them is like you say, like just do your thing, and when can you say fuck up on this podcast?
Well, you just have, so
okay. So
you've set a precedent.
So go ahead, do your thing, and when you fuck up, then try to learn from it. That's a good approach. I mean, most companies never even get that far, that they're actually willing to take the time and put the resources into learning from their failures. But then there's another aspect of actually taking, called sort of meaningful experimentation, where you actually purposely do experiments that are allowed to fail, that just keep going, where you where you actually do things that you know are, where you don't know whether they will succeed or not. And you, despite that, you're willing to invest the money and the time into that. And those kind of sort of that purposeful experimentation, which leads to failure more often than not, that's more rare. There are some companies that are really good at it, but they're still very rare.